Hey guys, welcome back to yet another video. So in this video, we'll talk about IAM policies. So by end of this video, we'll know how to write an IAM policy and what permissions is over there. If any existing policies in your account, you can read them and then get to know like what actions are allowed and what actions are denied as a default as per your policies. Come on, let's jump into the video. So when we talk about IAM policies, there are generally two types of policies which we need to care about. One is the identity based policies and then resource based policies. So these two are the major types of policies which we need to focus on. So the identity based policies is something like where you provide the policies to your actual users. So either it can be to your users or to your user groups. So what is user, what is groups? We have seen in the previous video. If you haven't watched, please go and watch that. So and then you have the resource. So resource is basically the policies which are mapped to the resource itself, like services like S3 or SQS or any other AWS services where you map the resource policies. So these are the two types of policies, and let's go in detail on it. So these IAM policies are written in a format called JSON. So it looks something like within the curly brackets you have the key name and then the value. So that's how the policies are being written. It's written in a JSON and it's more simplistic to read as well. So I will show you like how a generic JSON looks, but before seeing like how the JSON would look like, let's see how to actually generate the JSON or how to generate the policy. So AWS provides an inbuilt tooling for us in order to create an policy. So you can go to this link. Again, I will leave the link in the comment and the description as well. So you can go here and then you can see like what type of policy you want to generate. So for the identity based policies, you would go with the IAM policy so that we can see like what are the parameters required and what is what. So in the screen you could see the policy types we choose as IAM, and then there are like multiple options available over there to choose. So the first thing is an effect, which is an allow or deny. So effect is more like what action you want to imply if that condition gets satisfied. So do you want to make an allow action or to make a deny action? So to keep in mind is that by default, if you are not mentioning any specific thing, then the action applies is deny. And then if you forcefully add a deny to it, then it means that overrides any allow, which means in the same policy, if you are keeping one allow condition and then a deny condition for the same match, then deny takes the precedence over the allow. And then you can choose like service. So let's say I have an user A, and so this identity based policy is going to be mapped to this user. So we are mapping this policy to this user, and here we are saying like what services the user is allowed to access or what services we are denying the user to access. So that's what the service comes into picture. And then we have actions. So actions is where like what type of actions is allowed. Let's say like S3 as a service, I can do multiple actions. Like I can create a bucket, I can upload a file, I can download a file, or I can add some bucket policies, I can create cross-region replication, I can enable encryption. There are like n number of options it's achievable as part of the S3 bucket as a single service itself. So here we can say like what are the actions allowed and what are the actions denied by a single user or identity to whom we are mapping to. In case if you want to allow at once, like enter end-to-end action, you can choose all actions. Same way, if you want to deny, you can choose all actions and then say deny. Then you could see like an Amazon resource name, the ARN. So here we are saying, so identity based mapping, we know like to whom we are using to map, either to a user or a group, and then comes the picture of what service we are allowing and deny. And then, so here we are saying like an S3, right? So let's say I want to allow an action for a specific S3 bucket, where I want to deny a specific action for a specific S3 bucket. I might want to allow an action for S3 bucket A, but I want to deny an action for S3 bucket B. Then this ARN comes handy. So this ARN is something called as Amazon resource name, and so wherever any resource you create, it can be an IAM, it can be an S3, it can be an policy, whatever you create, an S3 bucket, you would see something called as ARN, and then that's a unique resource identifier provided by the Amazon itself. So in this case, they are looking for an S3 bucket itself. So that's why the example they provided as the template, like how you would look like. And then you can provide an conditions which is for which is for let's say I want to imply this policy only if they're coming from a specified IP address, or if they are specified timings. So those kind of things uh, you can do it over here. Like this is like current time. You can do source IP is this. So those kind of conditions you can play with it. Like, so let's try to create an IAM policy. So you could see like I'm choosing an S3, and let's say I'm choosing an action. Again, here also you can see like multiple services you can choose, like an S3, Redshift, Route 53. In case if you want to choose all the service, you can still choose it like all service. For now, let's try to create only for an S3 bucket, and then let's say I'm providing access for creating a bucket, which means I can't do any other access things like uploading an object or other details. All I can do is just create a bucket. And then so what bucket we are letting to create. So this is a tricky scenario, right? Like the user is going to create a bucket, so the bucket name you can't see like say like, okay, this is a bucket name is allowed to be created or something like that. So in such case, what we can do is so this is the format, right? Like what is the one. So in this case, like this is the bucket name where you want to allow. Let's scenario like for conditions like multi-part upload where you are allowing, or you can specify the exact bucket name. So in case if you want to allow for the bucket name of entire account, within the account you want to allow, then you can just use star, which means wildcard, which means like any bucket, or it satisfies any value over there. So the key name is the folder, or if you want to like go granular into it, like you have an S3 bucket, and within that S3 bucket you have, let's say, multiple subfolders, and then you want to provide access only for folder 1, then you can still provide like f1/star, something like that. In case if you don't have any specific restrictions, then you can use wildcard. So this is the most common mistake people generally do. Like they just give like wildcard here, and they forget to provide the key name, which means they have only till bucket and they don't have access for the specific folder. So if you're creating an identity policy to provide access to the bucket, then you would need to go with this specific key name also as a star. So if you want, you can add a condition, but for now I'll just leave as it is, and let's say add statement. So now we can see like I'm affecting an allow, and then what action we're allowing, an S3 bucket to create, the resource, and then any conditions as none. So if I do generate policy, so this is how the policy would look like. So you get a version, and the statement itself, like what actions you are doing, as in the entire thing is in a JSON format, and then you have SID, action, effect, and resource. So if you see here, so this version denotes based on what syntax version, like because IAM is entirely managed by AWS, right, the service, and they periodically changes the syntax, and so this syntax is as of like 2012, 10, 17. So in case, let's say if they're changing the parameter in future, like from resource to some component or something, then which means it's a new version altogether. By mentioning the version here, we ensure that our existing policies don't get screwed up. So that's the main purpose of using it. So let's say if I want to add some more resource, right, like I might need to do like RDS, let's say for simplistic all service and all. So I'm doing it for all the RDS. If I do it, then you can see it's segregated by a comma, and then another within the curly braces, and another set of things opens. So if you are well versed with IAM policies, you might not even need the tooling to generate you the policy. All you can do is write your own JSON and play with it. We have the JSON policy. Let's see how to imply that or create a policy out of it. So to do that, we'll go for policies. Let's create the policy, and I can just directly go to JSON and paste stars. So it says warning 1. It says, yeah, it just gives a warning like we're using a star. Are you fine with it? But that's fine. So if you want, you can provide an add tag. So let's say user and demo. So you can say like create the policy, like, so I will just say like demo policy for demo. So now we can create the policy out of it. So our policy name is going to be as demo, and we have the entire rules being written. So once you create this policy, you can go and map it to your users, you can go and map it to your groups, all been discussed in our previous lecture video. So once this has been run, so the same way you can also read the policy, right? So all you need to focus on is the statement where you have SID is just a unique identifier. It has no major role to play. All you need to focus on is that action, like what are the actions you are allowing and or denying. So what actions is this policy is for, and then what are you going to do for that specific action? Are you going to allow or are you going to deny? And then what are the resources that covers into this picture of the policy? So it's all we need to focus on as part of reading the policy to see like what permissions you or any identity this policy is being mapped to has. And then so here also you can see something if I go in deep. So you have something called as policy versions. So this comes handy. So let's say I have written a custom policy demo, right? And I want to make some specific change to this policy. So let's say this one is like for all. So let's say like remove it, and let's say remove policy and save changes. So now you see I have made an changes to my policy, and what happens for the existing user, right? So I can't just directly roll out. Then you can see like policies like I have version 2 created. So in case if you want to fall back to your previous version, then you can still go back to the previous version 1, and if any use is reported, then you can quickly do it. So now you can see like the version 2 is set as default. In case if you want to roll back, then you will just say like version 1 as default. So likewise you can play with it. And same way in users, let's say I can add a user, and let's say demo user, just say permissions. You can attach existing policy here, demo, right? So yeah, so since you provide us a default one, then now you see it as the specific the default one has been added. So in case if you choose the version 2 as a default, then while mapping you will get that specific one as the default one. So that's how you will be playing with it on mapping the policies. Cool. So it's all about identity based policies and how will you create a custom policy, how to read a JSON out of it. So next thing we're going to talk about is the resource based policy. So the resource based policy is generally for a specific resource. Like for example, in S3 you have a bucket policy where you can provide a specific resource based policy, like what actions or who are being allowed to perform that action, all can be configured in the resource based policies. So same as IAM. So while choosing the one, you choose a resource based policy, like for what resource you are going to create. You have VPC, you have SNS, and then SQS, other services being provided. So same exactly as the identity based policy. So you have effect, are you going to allow or are you going to deny? The one new thing you would see is this principle. So the principle is for to whom this implies. You mean as an user, right? Like are you going to focus on a specific user or a specific group, or whom this is being targeted towards? Because we are not going to map the policy to the specific user, right? Because we are going to map this to a specific resource. And if you have a scenario like, okay, I have an S3 bucket to be accessed only by user A, then how can we say like, okay, who is this accessed? So that's where this principle comes into picture to say like whom you are evaluating. Like if the principle is something like who's a requester or the actual identity who is accessing this resource. So in case if you don't have any specific requirement as such, then you can provide a wildcard here, a star. If not, you will be providing an ARN of the user to it. Then you can choose a service, like for what service you're going to create. So since it's an S3 bucket policy, so you have S3 being chosen by default, and then what actions you are going to allow. So in the previous one, we have talked about the policy which is directly routed to the IAM user. Since it's in a resource, right? So you can say like what actions been allowed or for the specific resource. So then you can say, okay, this is going to be for like I need to create a bucket is allowed, or creating a job is allowed, or what. So that's what this specific things comes into picture. And then the ARN. So ARN is something like for which bucket you are going to allow. So if you are providing just a wildcard, then which means you can use the same policy to any S3 bucket in your account. or in case if you have a specific resource which should be applied. Let's say I want to apply only for an S3 bucket A, then you would be using that specific S3 buckets AR into it. So for now I'll just use star, and principal I will use it star to make it a simplistic one. Same as seen in the identity based policies, you have the conditions. You can say like only from the source IP this allowed, or only from the current time it's allowed. Those kind of things you can play with it. So you could see like I have generated the condition. So in case if you want to add multiple things, you can still do that. And if I do a generate policy, it again looks the same way as of a JSON formats, quite similar, just two parameters being introduced. One is the principal and the resource. So yeah, I think resource was there in the identity also, just one new parameter introduced is the principal. So same way you have the version, and then SID you have, which is unique identifier for the specific set of statement, and then I think it's called a statement ID as well, SID, and then you have accents, and then effect and allow and principal. So it's all about the policies, identity policies and resource policies. So this is how we generate the policies, and this is how you map it to a specific resource to a policy. In the next video we'll talk more about regions and availability zones, and that's the critical part when it comes to the architectural design, like how reliable you would create or how performance your application can be designed. So we'll deep dive into that. If you find this video useful, give a thumbs up, share our video with your peers and colleagues who are maybe find it useful. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. We will see you guys soon in our next video. Until then, tata bye bye from Vasan. Thanks.